Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Beyond Jupyter Notebooks, MLOps environment setup and first deployment. My name is Ryan Keenan, and I'm leading the product team at deeplearning.ai. We appreciate you taking the time to join us for this event. I can see that we have people joining us from all over the world, so I'll say good morning if you're in a time zone near me. I'm in California right now. Or good afternoon, good evening, maybe even good middle of the night to you if you're joining us from the other side of the world. Wherever you are, we're glad to have you with us. This event is a workshop that focuses on setting up your computer to build and deploy industry standard machine learning applications so that you're ready to maximize your impact during your first week of the job. If you have questions during the workshop today, we'd like to ask that you follow the Slido link in the description box below on YouTube. And even if you don't have a question, you can click that link to see the questions that others are asking and upvote your favorites. Our speaker will do his best to answer all your questions during the Q&A portion of the event. And so without further ado, I'd like to present Dr. Greg Loughnane, Head of Product and Curriculum at FourthBrain, where he leads their portfolio of machine learning engineering and MLOps courses. Over the past decade, Greg has worked as a product manager, a data science consultant, and machine learning researcher. But his real passion has always been in teaching. He's fascinated by where the workforce of the future will go and what it'll look like, and enjoys coaching young professionals on how to future-proof their careers against 21st technologies like AI and 3D printing. And so with that, I'll hand it over to you, Greg.
Hey, thanks so much, Ryan, for the great introduction. I'm really excited to be here and to talk today about how and why it's so important for you to get your MLOps development environment set up so that you can accomplish your first deployment. All right, what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to put MLOps in context first, and then we're going to dive into a few of the best practice MLE development tools out there on the market today that you need to know about. I'll talk a little bit in that section about the typical data science interactive development environment learning journey that may be similar to what you have gone through. And we'll talk a few preliminaries before we get into the live demo. We'll come back for conclusions at the very end. All right, so first let's talk context and put MLOps into some. Have you seen this meme? Hey, technical debt, why do you always wear that mask? Well, if we zoom in on this and we get to know MLOps a little bit better, this is actually pretty funny. And this is a very, very famous picture here behind the mask of MLOps. In fact, this is from a very famous paper called Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning Systems, written by a famous guy, David Scully, and many others at Google, who's well known in the data-centric AI and MLOps space. And the purpose of this figure is to show that ML code is really a small component of an ML system overall. And this is something that more and more people are starting to really open their eyes to as businesses try to create value with AI systems across the world. Now, interestingly, Jupyter Notebooks have been a really important tool for data science. And Jupyter Notebooks have also been sort of growing in scope and scale and their ability to include some of these other aspects beyond data and model within the Jupyter Notebook. So, you know, we're getting questions coming into this event, you know, how can we keep up with new tools in the market? What about these low code, no code tools? Yeah, you really do need to watch out for those. One-click deployments from Jupyter Notebooks, you know, one-line deployments from Jupyter Notebooks. These things are real, but they're not industry standards yet. And so to get out of the notebook in 2022, to get that model deployed, to get your serving infrastructure set up, you still need to get out of the notebook. And today we're going to talk about how to do that. Now, historically, non-AI digital product systems have primarily been built by software engineers and then maintained by DevOps engineers. You know, it's important today as an MLE to really develop a skill set that exists somewhere between creation and infrastructure. And that is actually exactly why the MLOps specialization from deep learning was subtitled Machine Learning Engineering for Production. Julian Simon, the chief evangelist of Hugging Face, told me and our audience at FourthBrain in a recent event that you really want to be your own DevOps engineer in today's world. So concretely, in order to get started with this event, we really want to understand, yes, what's inside of that ML code and what's going on with the data, but it's infinitely, potentially more important today for you to be the one on your team that helps data science get out of the notebook. All right, so that's about it for MLOps context here. We were asked, what are the recommendations for moving from notebook-based delivery to production? And that's where best practice MLE development tools come in. Now, in short, what is the best practice MLE development tool? What we're seeing in the market is a very short, simple answer. It's VS Code. Is this part of the MLOps course at FourthBrain? Yes, it's part of all of our courses. And it's part of all Silicon Valley startups that I've seen. But let's back up. Let's talk a little bit about the data science learning journey that you may have gone through and that is pretty typical of many learners out there. So consider Sarah. She's a data scientist and former researcher. She graduated a few years ago and she got a job as a data scientist. She made that transition that so many of us tried to make a few years back. Now, despite trying out a few different IDEs along the way, like Spider and PyCharm, she really kind of settled in to just mostly leveraging Jupyter notebooks. And in fact, when she goes to work now, she logs into AWS, but she logs into AWS only to open up a Jupyter notebook instance and then get right back to work exploring data and developing insights. And she's not really seen the fruits of her labor over the past few years translate to real business value or translate to real impact. So she started to feel like she wasn't really growing enough. She went out, she looked for a new job for the past few months, and she finally landed one. So she's going to move from a bigger company to a smaller Silicon Valley startup as a machine learning engineer. She just got her new Apple MacBook in the mail, and it's pretty cool. She's excited about it. She was an Apple user before, but this is obviously the new one. And she wants to set up herself for success. She knows she's got a lot to learn, and she wants to try to make the most out of this machine learning engineer job. So she's done some research. She's not really sure which IDE she should get set up with. And this is where our story begins. What tools does she need to succeed? What are some of the best practices when setting up an ML environment at work? Well, first, let's talk a little bit about what needs to go into an IDE. Let's break it down into its constituent parts. First and foremost, what is the hardware and software that you're using? A lot of us out there are using Mac, certainly in the FourthBrain audience, but many of us are using Windows, many of us are using Linux. It's very, very, very important to understand this first and foremost, because this is going to sort of drive many other things down the line. Today, and Sarah and are both going to be on, I'm going to be on a Mac M1 chip. You may have heard of these, fresh out of the oven, not so fresh. There's M2 now already, but these things are new and they're pretty cool. And one of the really cool things about them is that they are actually GPUs and CPUs in one. Now, this is cool for some, and in other circles, not so cool, because it kind of creates a lot of problems using Apple Silicon if you've been a developer on Intel and more classic GPU setups for quite some time already. So once you get it figured out what your hardware and software is, you really need to dig into which tools are you going to pick up. And then it's the implementation of these tools that is going to be affected by that hardware and software baseline. So the tools that we're going to go through today, number one is version control. So number two is your command line interface. Package and environment management is number three. And then we're going to look at web app frameworks and containerization. So first, version control. Now, it's important to try to understand, what the core concept of each of these constituent elements of your development environment are. And the core concept of version control is Git. And, GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, AWS code commit. What is the core aspect of Git? And the core aspect is that everything, excuse me, everything is local. So what you want to understand about, excuse me, what you want to understand about Git is that you actually pull everything down from a remote repository so that you're developing locally. GitOps is a new big thing. And, we recently did an event with Iterative AI. They're a leader in GitOps for MLOps today. Really encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning more about GitOps. So we will look at Git today. And the command line interface is the second tool that comes up. And the command line interface is essentially your computer's text interface. It's not a GUI. And have you ever seen people, command line ninjas out there running a bunch of command line codes one after another? I'm going to try not to do that today. And I'm going to try to make sure that we keep it pretty tame. However, we are going to move a little bit quickly in the demo, so I'm going to do my best. So we use the Unix command line at FourthBrain, and it's an industry standard. The Unix command line is important because, number one, it gives us a shell. And the shell is simply a computer program that exposes the operating system to a human, like you or I, or to another program. It can be a command line or it can be a GUI, but the shell is the important concept here. And Unix-like operating systems like Mac and Linux exist, but then we also have Windows. And you may have heard of Windows subsystem for Linux. It's a way to sort of emulate Unix-like operating systems and to be able to use the same syntax. And depending on your view of Windows and WSL, you may view it as a bit of a superpower in some cases, and you may view it as a bit of a, well, less than a superpower in others. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's a way to align your syntax and your development with all the other developers on the planet. So it's up and coming, and it's growing in usage. All right, so package and environment management is next, and the tool that we pick up in data science generally, and that we recommend at FourthBrain, is Conda. So Conda is a package management and environment management system. And what that means is it helps you manage your libraries, pandas, NumPy, etc. It also helps you manage your environments. That means where you're actually developing your Python code. For today's demo, I'm going to pick up Miniconda because, as it turns out, Miniconda is the one that we really do need to use for the Apple M1 new chip. And finally, we're going to look at a web application framework. Again, we're going to look at the most important one, most used for data science. And last year, it was kind of interesting when we did an event with deep learning. We did this question, and Flask was in second to I have no idea which web framework to pick up. When we did a poll this time around, we said, hey, which application framework would you choose? And FastAPI won with FourthBrain's audience. FastAPI won with deep learning's audience. And we even got Sebastian Montano to comment, which was pretty cool. So shout out to Sebastian, creator of FastAPI. So FastAPI is fast, and it is up and coming, and it's one that you should know about and that we'll be diving into just a little bit, scratching the surface of today. What about containers? Well, the answer for containers today is Docker. Enough said about that. So putting things together, VS Code is the chosen one because you can put everything in it all at once. And this is what we'll see in our demo. All right, so let's get to it. Let's go ahead and get started we're going to share a link in the chat, which is for FourthBrain's software development for MLOps 101. And what this is it's a tutorial to get you set up no matter what operating system and hardware that you use. This is currently supports Windows. I think this is written for Windows 10, Linux, Debian, and Ubuntu. And this Mac OS setup is actually for Intel, but what I'm going to walk you through today, I'm going to give you some hints on how to get the M1 set up. And we do have some plans to release some longer form videos that sort of start from scratch in the coming weeks for all of you that have registered for the event. So we're excited to send those out to you very soon. All right, so we're going to get started with Mac OS. And the first thing that we see is we want to open the terminal on Mac. So on Mac, we can search for the terminal, or we can simply go find it somewhere. And the terminal is a place. We're going to blow up the text on the terminal. The terminal is the place where we can interface with the operating system. And first thing is we want to make sure Homebrew is installed. Homebrew is essentially pip for Mac. It's a package manager. And we've already obviously installed Homebrew to prepare for this event. So we just want to make sure that everything's up to date. So we're going to go ahead and do a brew update. And we are already up to date. We've installed wget. So if we needed to take and go get the Anaconda package, we can do that. For the Mac M1 chip, what we actually need to do is we need to download the Miniconda package for the new macOS Apple M1 64-bit. That's what you go ahead and you just download. If you click it and you open it up, you run through the installation, you're good to go. Git is already ready to rock and roll for us. And for VS Code, you do a similar thing that I just did with Miniconda, which is you go to VS Code, you find your appropriate setup. In this case, it's Apple Silicon setup. Okay. So that kind of gets us started setting up our environment. Now, the next thing that we want to do before we jump into VS Code is we want to make sure that Conda and that our environment that we're going to use for development is set up. If you're familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, you probably already have your environment set up. And you're probably comfortable with commands like conda create. But what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to go ahead and create an environment because we really don't have time to wait in today's short session. I'm going to just activate the environment that I've already set up for this event, which is called Beyond Jupyter. And as you can see, the base environment is now showing as Beyond Jupyter. So that means we are locked and loaded with our libraries and packages. Okay, so now on to VS Code. Once you get it installed, then what's nice is the very first thing that we would recommend that you go ahead and do is you just start working in VS Code. So forget the terminal because you can actually use the terminal in VS Code. So we're going to open up VS Code, dark mode, obviously. And we're going to go ahead and not get started, but rather we're going to open up the terminal. So let's see, VS Code. Is let me go ahead and not seeing the terminal here. So let's just make sure that we have the right VS Code set up. We have Apple Silicon VS Code. Everything's good to go here. Not seeing the proper I'm not seeing the, there we go. That was weird. I'm not sure what was going on there, but when you open up VS Code, you should see things beyond file, edit, and selection. So you go over to terminal and you open new terminal, and there's the terminal. So perhaps that was an M1 buggy issue. I'm not exactly sure what that was, but if we go ahead and do the same exact thing that we did in the terminal that was not in VS Code, we can just do conda activate Beyond Jupyter. And you can see now we're in the Beyond Jupyter environment. And so straight away, we are just now in VS Code. So great. We are going to go ahead and take this next step, which is to install the proper extensions to get us ready to rock and roll. IntelliCode is the famous AI-powered coding assistant, so make sure that's installed. Jupyter, obviously, make sure that's installed. And then the last piece, rather than another extension, you actually want to set the Python interpreter. And the interpreter in Python is simply a way to interact with the Python programming language. So, you know, you can open a file, or you can simply do Shift-Command-P on Mac, and you can start typing select interpreter. And what you're going to select is you're going to select exactly the conda environment that we installed earlier. So for me, that's Beyond Jupyter, and I'm going to go ahead and select it here. And I don't really need to worry about this issue down here. So now I'm ready to go. Now, one of the things I wanted to show is just to give you a feel for how this works in Jupyter Notebook. So first of all, let's go ahead and, you know, save it as not Untitled 1, since let's say at least we're doing MLOps here. Let's do hello MLOps. And let's go ahead and just make sure that we can rock this out. Hello MLOps software dev. And you can see it's starting to do intelligent things. We just run this. And there we are. So we can also sort of set this up and check it and make sure that it has NumPy and everything else in it. This is good to go for now, and we're going to keep it moving. So I'll go ahead and close this out. We'll come back to this in just a second. But we've now done our first development in VS Code. Now, in order to really be doing this in a way that is version controlled, we want to make sure that our GitHub is set up. So the first thing is create your GitHub portfolio. So I've created one using my FourthBrain account. You can set up your secure shell, your SSH shell. So again, the shell is what we're using. You can make it more secure by setting up this access code. I've already set mine up, so we are good to go there. You'll see where that comes into play in a little bit. And we just want to sort of create a new repo through which we can work. So if we go to our repositories, and creating a new repo is directly in here. If we go to our repository, we can create new, and we've actually given you some instructions here on what to select. So the repo name, let's go with MLOps dev, and let's go with public. Let's add a README. The git ignore template basically says, hey, when you're doing version control, don't worry about files that are not Python. And the MIT license is pretty open, and we dig that. So let's go ahead and go with that MIT license. All right, so now we've got our MLOps dev environment we've got our MLOps dev repo set up on GitHub. All right. So MLOps dev is set up on GitHub. Beyond Jupyter is the environment that's set up on my computer. And I just created a file. So I've got this MLOps dev thing that's in the cloud. I've got this Beyond Jupyter thing that's down on the local level. And what I want to do is I want to connect them. I want to connect them a little bit. And I want to make sure that when I'm developing locally, there's a direct line to now this repo that's in the cloud. So what I need to do is I need to clone my repo down from the cloud. And the way that I can do this is I can create a place where I want to hold all of my code. This is a new computer. I'm getting started at my new job. I want to create the main repo to hold all my code. This means I'm in the home directory. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory called MLOps. I'm going to say, yeah, MLOps Beyond. MLOps Beyond. That sounds pretty cool. And then I'm going to CD into MLOps Beyond. And I'm going to create another directory called code. I'm going to make another directory called code. And then I'm going to CD into another directory called code. So now you can see I moved to MLOps Beyond and I moved now to code. And what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and show you where this exists in Finder. So if you're on Mac, then you can go to Documents or to anywhere else. You can hold the Option key and you can go back to the root folder, which is here. Shift Command period hides and unhides hidden folders. We don't really need it right now, but if we go to Users, Greg, this is that root folder, and you see that Hello MLOps IPython notebook. So MLOps Beyond is what we just created, and the code folder is what we just created. So this is where we want things to be, is in that code folder. All right. So we want to now add our repo that we just created, our MLOps dev repo. Yeah, not CD. We want to CD into there. We want to git clone our repo. And I'm just going to clear this so we can continue to make sure that we can see all the code here. And then I'm going to CD into that MLOps dev repo. And so you can see now, if I go into MLOps Beyond and code, that MLOps dev repo is there. That README is there. That MIT license is there. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this a very simple way. I'm going to take Hello MLOps. I'm going to put it into directly this MLOps dev. All right. So now I have a file in there. The file's in there on the ground locally, but it's not in there in the cloud. So how can we get it in there in the cloud? Well, that's the Git process. You know, one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are set up to remotely access this origin repo. And we've essentially set up our origin branch with fetch and push options. We're going to set up our config here with our email address. And we're going to set up our username. And, you know, maybe it's just you developing, so maybe that isn't super necessary. And we're actually going to create a local dev branch here. So now you see you switched to new branch local dev. Now this add, you can add anything you like. You know what I'd like to add? I'd like to add that file that I put in there. And in VS Code, this is where we can start leveraging VS Code's nice setup of I want to actually go in there and I want to look and I want to make sure I know what's in there all the time. Oh, look, Hello MLOps is in there. And I want to view that terminal again. Where were you? There you are. I want to make sure that we're activated in Beyond Jupyter. So I'm in MLOps dev. And now I want to git add my hello mlops.ipynv. So now I've git added it. I want to git commit it now. And you see now I've committed. Now, add versus commit. What's the deal with that on Git? Very important question. In short, git add and git commit allow you to traverse between the working directory and the repo that is the remote repo through a staging area. Now you can choose whether or not to use the staging area. This is a very simple thing. We're not going to use the staging area, but just for the purpose of process, I'm showing add and commit. You can do git commit minus the add to go ahead and make that happen directly. We're thinking about doing a more in-depth Git tutorial very soon in the future, so let us know if you'd be interested in that. All right, so that's the quick git commit. So then we'll do git checkout. We want to now push our local changes to our remote repo. And boom, boom, boom. And if we go look, we want to view the code. We see now there we've got our hello MLOps in our Git repo. So now we're cooking with gasoline. All right, now we're doing some real dev work. I know many of the data scientists out there, you haven't done Git a whole lot, and that's okay. But if you want to really get started using many different file types, many different setups, you really want to get going with Git from day one. All right. So I'm not going to pull down the web app that we're going to deploy today because in the interest of time. But what I am going to do, we're going to share this link in the chat as well. This is from the deeplearning.ai MLOps specialization and MLE for production. And what this is we're going to go into course 4, week 2, and we're going to look at the Fast API and Docker lab. And we're just going to do the Fast API and Docker lab for the no batch setup, 1 prediction per request. Okay, and I've already preset this up in the interest of time and streamlining. So I'm going to open a different location here. After I close this folder, I'm going to open up this pre-built folder called MLOps. And in this MLOps folder, what you can see is I've got an app folder and I've got a machine learning engineering for production public folder. So this was Git cloned down locally, and it has yet to be pushed back up. But you can easily follow the rest of this adding a remote repo documentation on our tutorial to do this all with the proper Git practices. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this 1 prediction per request, no batch setup for week 2 ungraded lab, Fast API, and Docker. So in this ungraded lab, we use a very, very simple data set. It's called the wine data set. And the wine data set, it's got 178 samples, 13 dimensions of features, 3 classes, and they're simply called class 0, class 1, and class 2. So it's very quick, very fast, very baseline. So this is more about the web application framework and Docker than it is about the wine data set. All right. So first, we're going to deploy the Fast API web app without Dockerizing it. And what you can do is you can look in this app folder and you can look at this main.py file. And we don't really need to view the terminal now, but we can. And if you're following along with me, then you might be starting to get pretty good at this. Although it is interesting to view the terminal when we actually deploy the web app, because we do get outputs in the terminal. So you can kind of follow along the deep learning page here on GitHub that kind of goes through each chunk of code. So first we import, then we're sort of initializing our application. We're setting up the data structure for how we define those 13 features that allow us to classify the wine type. And then we are loading our wine data in the form of a pickle file. And we're setting up our prediction function that then is leveraged directly by our application. Remember, what we're doing when we're developing a web app is we're essentially developing an application and a way to interface with that application, or an API. So you'll be very familiar with this prediction, and you'll want to go ahead and make sure that you take a close look at each of these different pieces of syntax. So I want to make sure that we are staying tight on time. I think there was a link that was maybe broken, and I'm not sure exactly which link that was, so my apologies. We will address that in the Q&A period. But for now, I want to make sure that we're just kind of showing this quick deployment, and then we'll come back and we'll address any concerns. Okay, so the Fast API setup here is very simple because it's already primarily done. Although Fast API is very nice in general, and it's really easy to kind of plug and play. So if you scroll down on the deep learning page, this is really the main piece that runs the Fast API app. And one of the things that I also want to mention before we dive into this is I had to install a few different libraries. So for example, if you look at what was pip installed, you can do this through pip list. You can see the libraries that are in there, and there's quite a few of them. One of the libraries that was important to have here, obviously, was the Fast API library. And it's worth noting that on Mac, you can do the same thing with pip as with brew. A lot of times you can pip install or brew install, but on the M1 chip, I needed to pip install Fast API, and that was the only way to get it working. So, you know, everybody's dealing with this new hardware issue, and that's one thing to keep in mind. There's also a brew list of packages that help to run everything as well. All right, so you can check those packages, and you'll know when you're missing packages because you'll get error codes. So the way you run a Fast API app is you run this command, and if everything's set up properly, then we should be good to go. However, the thing to note here is that I'm actually not running the command from the MLOps root folder. What I want to do is I want to run the command from the app folder. And that will allow me to now directly run my Fast API app. There's a couple of error warnings that aren't exactly going to break things, some scikit-learn warnings. But what you'll see now I have the app running on this particular domain. This is the localhost domain on your computer. And you'll see it says detail not found. That's okay. That's okay. And what we want to do is we just want to do /docs. And what this gives us access to is now this is the back end of the web app that we just deployed. This is sort of the back end GUI of Fast API, which is one of the really nice things about it. And we can actually try this out now. And we can try this out by clicking try it out. And it's looking for some input that looks like this. And here's another powerhouse thing about VS Code is that it can open up anything that we need it to. So in no batch, what we'll find is we'll find 3 wine examples. 0.json is a JSON file that we can copy and paste into here. That is class 0. And if we run execute here, we'll see that it predicts class 0. So great, there we are. We can also try, let's say, class 2 here, copy, paste, execute, and we are predicting class 2. So success. All right, so we just now deployed our first web application. So I encourage you to look deeply at this code, try to understand exactly what's going on. But most importantly, it's more about, can you plug in a new ML model to this code as a first cut in your MLOps learning journey. Okay, so moving right along, what I want to do is I just want to quickly show you how to deploy the Dockerized version of this file. And the Dockerized version is run not directly in this app folder, but instead it's run in the course 4, week 2, no batch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this relative path. I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to CD into I'm going to CD up one. Then I'm going to CD into the no batch folder. And the no batch folder, we're going to go ahead and we don't really need anything here. If we're following the deep learning tutorial, we can Dockerize this pretty easily this is sort of showing each of the components of the Docker file, which are, we're using a lightweight Python interpreter. We're using the proper requirements. We're pip installing some of them. We're exposing, again, remember the shell. We're exposing port 80. We're using the same command that we used in the command line, only we're doing this all within the context of a container. So the way to build our image is simply with this. And you'll see it builds very, very quickly because I've already built this. It'll take about 70 seconds for you. And then we can run the container from here. But on M1, the easiest way to get this to work was actually to use the Docker Hub tutorial. The Docker Hub, I'm sorry. And the Docker Hub is where now, since I just built this image, I can now see this image here. I can run it. In optional settings, I want to put that port 80 that I said I was going to use. And now it's running, and you'll see it's starting. And we now are running our app within a Docker container. We get this great message. Congratulations, your API is working as expected. And just as before, we can /docs, and we can predict wine classes. We're going to try it out with our final wine class here of wine class number 1. Make sure that we're good to go. And we are, in fact, good to go. All right. So that's, in a nutshell, how you do a quick IDE setup, how you make sure that you go beyond Jupyter notebooks, and how you get started with MLOps. I want to kind of put this in context with a great image from MLOps.org, where there were all these great tools that really started to come into the foray over the past few years. Containerization got huge, and now we are in this MLOps gold rush age. And if you can really dig in to everything that we looked at today, then you're going to be set up for success in your future. So getting up step by step is easy. It's easier than you think. And we are going to be releasing much longer form where you can watch the slow setup. I've released something similar to this after the last event on step-by-step NLP. I'm going to sort of wipe my computer and then film a step-by-step all the way back up on macOS M1. We're going to be releasing a Windows 10 and a Linux Ubuntu video via direct email, so look out for those. And simply using Jupyter CLI and starting to get into Git through VS Code is a way to take one step towards your ML engineering future. And, it's not important to learn every tool, but it is important to learn one tool of each type on your one operating system. So it's version control, it's command line, it's package and environment management, it's your web app framework, and it's containerization. That's going to help you go beyond. All right, so your resources, these are the links. We'll make these slides available for you as well. I hope this was helpful to you, and we're going to go ahead and go get into questions now on Slido. Okay, so yes, this session will be available after. I'm going to go out of dark mode for Slido here. The session will be available, yes. Presentation will be available, yes. I recommend good online ML course or upskilling. Deep Learning and FourthBrain have some great ML courses. It really depends on what your particular aim is in terms of what you want out of your ML career. And, it's hard to recommend an exact ML course if it's sort of generic like that. And I'm not sure about what your context is coming into it, but it's important to learn basic Python. It's then important to go ahead and learn basic modeling. So pandas, scikit-learn. And then it's important to, pick up one of the deep learning frameworks, TensorFlow, PyTorch. And, once you start to grow out of that, it's really then important to try to pick up the tools that we talked about today. And you can find courses on any and everything, but I would encourage you to focus on end-to-end contributions, projects, and things that interest you, because those are the stories that you're going to be able to tell at the next interview, at the next place that is going to allow you to take that next step in your career. So, I think no course has the answer for you. You got to kind of do some career coaching with yourself, do some soul searching with yourself to try to figure out, okay, what are the things, what is the type of data I want to become a true expert in? What is the type of thing that I really want to spend all of my time on over the next few years, and then start doing that. Do you recommend using Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Notebooks for MLOps tasks? Do you have a recommendation for a better tool to do a similar task like Jupyter? I do recommend using Jupyter Notebooks. I just also recommend augmenting your Jupyter Notebook knowledge. So Jupyter Notebooks are very powerful. They're still one of the most popular tools out there, and they're going to continue to improve. Jupyter Lab is one of those tools that is trying to improve the Jupyter Notebook experience. And I've spoken with a number of startups that are really focused on helping people who are working within the Jupyter Notebook to easily deploy from within the Jupyter Notebook. So there are platforms being built today that could easily come on the market tomorrow and start dominating, where it's simply one-click deployment from the Jupyter Notebook. However, this is towards low-code, no-code, and where low-code, no-code tools break down is when, you have to scale, and you have to scale complexity, you have to scale usage, you have to scale intelligently and cost-effectively. So, I think for MVPs and for getting stuff, just in front of a user or in front of your boss or in front of internal stakeholders, Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Notebooks, they're going to continue to develop capabilities. These startups with other products are going to continue to develop capabilities. You may be able to use them for many MLOps tasks in the future. Another thing to note here is AWS, GCP, Azure, even Databricks are all building in quick deployment tools to their workflows. So if you already leverage a cloud platform, then your workflow might easily leave the Jupyter Notebooks with a 1 or 2 click procedure just because of that. So all stuff to keep an eye on. It's a very, very fast moving industry. Thoughts on Conda versus pip versus poetry as package managers. I don't have strong opinions about one particular tool versus another. I do think that in terms of package management, the thing that we like about Conda is that it incorporates a lot of what many data scientists need by default. And so it's a great default. I think that whatever you need to get the job done is just pick that up and don't worry too much about, AWS versus GCP or Conda versus pip versus anything else. I wouldn't get bogged down with that. And I certainly don't get bogged down with that. And I don't recommend that students do. As long as you're able to manage your packages, whatever you do to get there, if it's all the way with Homebrew on, Mac Intel, then that's fine as well. So what are the best model storage formats? This is obviously a very hard question. And the answer is, it depends. What do you want to store about your model? What kind of metadata are you wanting to store? How do you want to be able to leverage older models based on triggers that might exist within an MLOps pipeline? One of the problems one of the types of tools that is solving this problem for MLOps are the model registry tools out there. So, tools like coming from, MLflow from Databricks, or Iterative is producing, model registry, GitOps sort of focused MLOps model and hyperparameter tuning, and everybody's trying to solve a particular problem, and whatever model storage format is tending to work best for that problem at this time is the one that they pick up. So I would say, look at the problem that you're trying to solve, and don't overkill the problem with, some sort of, you don't need to, if you're running a model and it's okay if you retrain it, in a week, you don't need to have like ultimate super fast ability to, re-implement an old model that was from 4 or 5 retrainings ago, instantly, but if you're serving up this model to tens or thousands or millions of users, and, the second you realize there's something wrong, you need to have a real-time, retroactive version control model set up, then that's a very, very different problem that you're solving. And so you need to just be aware of that, and don't overkill the solutions to smaller problems with very, very large tools. Can we use Conda commercially? Actually, don't know about that. So I have noticed that every company, Docker included, is moving more and more to some commercial aspect. So, Docker is now officially a company, and, you have to be aware of these things. So what is the best place to save your models that you work on in development stage to present them for the owner in a web page? So I think that the best way to do this depends on how many models you really need to save. And this is where I would recommend starting with a tool like MLflow's ML tracking tool is sort of the entry-level tool there. And you can, that would be where I would start. Try to use ML tracking. We did an event. Fei Wong at Databricks did an amazing job showing us how to do that. So you can check that out on FourthBrain's YouTube site. And, I would go ahead and get started with that one. And that would be a way to really add some value with experiment tracking and version control. And I think the last, why mini Conda? Because M1 didn't work with full Anaconda. Found some threads. It's not set up to work yet exactly, at least for what I needed it for today. And so Miniconda, it's a lighter weight version. And so potentially it was easier to align with the new Mac hardware. And I think that, we'll just answer a couple real quick. How is MLOps on AWS different than on the own system? It's not different fundamentally, but the nuts and bolts of exactly how you implement it are going to be different depending on their GUI. And what's wrong with PyCharm? Nothing's wrong with PyCharm. It's simply not the industry standard that VS Code is. And so that's why we really push. PyCharm was something you heard about a lot more a few years ago than you do now. VS Code has really stepped their game up, in my opinion. And from what I'm seeing, other people seem to agree. So, yep, I think that's about where we'll button it up. I really appreciate everybody's attention today. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen share and welcome Ryan back to close us out.
Thanks, Greg. That was awesome. Actually, when you started into the demo and it became clear all of the things that you were going to get through or include in this demo, I was like, really? Okay, we're going to get to the end of this? Amazing job. I really, really appreciated how much ground you covered in such a short time. Clearly more details to be known there. And it's great that you're going to put out a more detailed version of all this. So thanks a lot. And thank you everyone for your participation in this event, for showing up, for asking questions. This event has been brought to you by FourthBrain and deeplearning.ai. The FourthBrain community, the AI community with FourthBrain is 50,000 strong and growing. And for more access to content like this seminar, please visit fourthbrain.ai. And in honor of FourthBrain's 2-year anniversary, they'll be offering a 10% discount, and that's worth $600 to anyone who applies to one of their programs before October 1st. Deeplearning.ai is also going to send a follow-up email survey to everyone who attended today. And we'd love to hear about how we can make these events more useful to you and better going forward. A selected 100 attendees who fill out the survey will receive a promo code for 50% off of 1 month subscription to any of the deeplearning.ai specializations on Coursera. So please go ahead and fill that out. And that brings us to the end of today's event. So until next time, be well and keep learning.